The Sopranos follows New Jersey mob boss Tony Soprano as he juggles family life with being the boss of a crime syndicate. In the crime world, Tony comes across many colourful individuals, some who work under him, some with him, and some against him, like Paulie Gualtieri, Richie Aprile, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and Bobby Bacala. One such character is Ralph Cifaretto. Ralph is a soldier and eventual captain of the DeMeo glorified crew, and is not present in the first 2 seasons as he oversees the family's real estate interests in Miami. Ralph eventually becomes the captain of the Aprile crew, and he is known to be a manipulator, highly cunning, and perhaps the most intelligent member of the entire crew. For sure one of the highest earners at the very least. He is even known to the New York Lupertazzi crime boss Carmine, who refuses to have him whacked after Ralph steps out of line. And stepping out of line he does so on numerous occasions due to his unstable, obnoxious, and downright dangerous behaviour. Ralph brings home the big bucks, but he also causes many problems, from killing a pregnant stripper, making a fat joke about the wife of an underboss, and being a bad influence on Jackie Jr., son of former boss Jackie Aprile, leading Jackie down a spiral of idiocy, ending with his death. Ralph infuriates Tony on numerous occasions, and the issue for Tony is compounded by the fact that Ralph is not scared of him, and even has cause for legitimate beef when at one point Tony physically attacks him. During an argument at Ralph's house about a fire which killed Pyomai, a racehorse which Ralph owned and which Tony was emotionally attached to, the two get physical, leading Tony to choke out Ralph, killing him. It is difficult to think of a character more despicable than Ralph. Some of his actions are utterly depraved, and he seems to actually enjoy hurting others, or at the very least does not care at all how his actions affect others, like when he damages Georgie's eye at the Bing. The overall treatment and eventual beating and murder of Tracy is sickening and ranks among the very worst things a character has ever done on the show. With all that being said, Ralph is still a very entertaining character, portrayed charismatically by Joe Pantoliano. If most evil characters are ones you love to hate, Ralph is one where you hate that you love him. On this channel, I like to look at certain Sopranos characters and offer alternative narratives to what the general perception is regarding the character. Examples include why you're wrong about Bobby Bacala, why you're wrong about Little Carmine, and the case for Phil Leotardo. I make these when I just feel there's a little more to be said for some of the characters, things that aren't really being said. I never intended to make one for Ralph. As far as I was concerned, Ralph is entertaining but was a despicable individual, sticking out even among the murderers and thieves of The Sopranos. Even if I wanted to, it's almost impossible to argue a case defending Ralph as a person. But recently, an episode of The Sopranos was on TV and I watched it. It just happened to be whoever did this, the episode in which Ralph dies, and I was struck by the character of Ralph and all of a sudden felt this man had a side of the story to tell. Of course, even without this episode, we can infer that Ralph is a damaged person. His bedroom escapades with his female companions are weird and fetish-like. We're told he bottoms from the top. There's the mommy's little whore scene. There's the scene about wanting a cheese grater used on his privates. And then there's things like the threesome with Tracy where she was clearly unhappy. It's like he enjoys sex when he's abusing someone or when he's being abused, or at least is fantasizing about being abused. That's dicked up. It's extremely common in sociopaths, mass murderers, serial killers, and all sorts of messed up people to have been abused themselves as children, especially sexual abuse. And Ralph's bedroom activities very much imply he's been through some kind of trauma, maybe abused as a child. Ralph lost his dad at a young age, and perhaps his mother used him to fulfill her emotional needs in her husband's absence, a concept known as parentification. Maybe she even used him for her sexual needs. Hey, I understand Freud, as a concept. There's a lot about mothers and sons in The Sopranos. Melfi and Tony speak about this a lot. This isn't the video to discuss all that, but it's interesting to note that Ralph's very first scene in the show is him at Tony's, giving him condolences for his dead mother, and he mentions that he lost his last year. But I don't think it's out of the question to suggest his mother, or maybe his mother's boyfriend, did things to him, and in adulthood, he likes to abuse others now, to pass on that abuse. I mean, why would you want to be penetrated being called Mummy's little whore? His relationship to Tracy is also interesting for similar reasons. She also abused her son, burning him with cigarettes, so there is a link there, eventually telling Tony she wants to change and become a better parent. Maybe in a sick way, that abuse turned Ralph on, and when she changes for the better, he starts to lose interest in her. He seemingly likes to be abused by women, but only when he is safeguarded by having a measure of control. When he's actually abused, well, I mean, look at Tracy's death scene. When she hits him, his entire demeanor changes. It was like something inside him was triggered and he switched, just going at her relentlessly. Because there really does seem to be two Ralph Cifarettos. There's the crazy maniac who clearly has some kind of sociopathic mental issues, but there's also the captain who whipped the April crew into shape and is a solid earner, the man who is well liked by his crew and a fun guy to be around when he isn't acting up. Whoever did this leans heavily on the religious and spiritual side of things, I feel. As we know, the episode deals with Ralph's son being hit with an arrow and him having to deal with the possibility of his son living with brain damage. Ralph starts off the episode having a bath, which is similar to Detective Makazian, who also had a shower before he throws himself off a bridge, a spiritual ablution perhaps, a physical cleansing before death. Ralph mentions that his son didn't get oxygen to the brain, and Rosalie mentions that he's going to be a vegetable. But later in the episode, Ralph is hopeful and says to Tony that it might just be a matter of relearning how to talk. In other words, his son will recover. In the same scene, of course, Ralph is choked out, dying because of a lack of oxygen to the brain, almost as if he took the punishment that at first had been given to his son. Very allegorical. It's ironic as well because earlier in the episode, Ralph tells Nuki that her son had to be rushed to the hospital, when this is actually what happens to Ralph's kid. And this tragic accident that befalls Ralph's son has a profound impact on Ralph. He is a man that simply does not care. He lives life nonchalantly and he has no reason to care or worry about anything. But all of a sudden, he is given a reason to care. He is reminded how fragile life is, how much he actually has to lose. He used to feel untouchable and had no empathy because he had no reason to have it with everything going his way in life. All of a sudden, he is made to feel vulnerable and is humbled. He understands other people's pain, in particular the pain of Rosalie after the death of her son, a time where Ralph, as her boyfriend, failed to be there for her. You know, legend has it that Ramesses II, who clashed with Moses, had such a perfect life that he never even suffered a headache in his lifetime. This, in addition to living a life as a king anyway, led to such an inflated ego he eventually called upon people to worship him as a god. I feel there are comparisons to be made here with Ralph, a man whose narcissism is fueled by the lack of genuine issues in his life. We see this in the real world also, egocentric people who are knocked down a perch or two after suffering trauma which makes them more empathetic to the troubles of others. And sometimes, as is the case with Ralph, it can change a person. In Abrahamic religions such as Christianity and Islam, it is mentioned that people can often receive afflictions from God to be reminded of their weakness and their need for God, so that they may turn to God in their time of need and hardship, because most people remember God in times of hardship rather than in times of happiness. Which of course Ralph does by meeting with the priest, and it seems to be genuine. He's lost, can't find his bearings, and this sick, depraved, utterly despicable man turns towards his faith. Ralph's attitude with the priest was commendable, and he actually impressed me. He could have easily lashed out at the priest and given a cliché, "Why me?" speech, or said an oft-repeated line in The Sopranos, "What kind of God?" Instead, he is actually remorseful and guilty for the way he's lived his life. After all, he has no reason to fake it in front of the priest. On top of this, he is introspective and reflective enough to recognize that he is being punished by God for his actions through his son, or at least that's the way he sees it. And it is quite remarkable for this kind of reflective dialogue to be coming from someone like Ralph. Sometimes you need an extreme moment of heightened trauma to make you see sense. Sometimes you need a sharp slap in the face to awaken you from your slumber. And Ralph recognizes that his son's injury is that slap. He has an epiphany, a moment of clarity, and in his own words, he's a changed man. And it's not as if the priest is putting words in his mouth. In fact, Father Phil was pretty weak in consoling Ralph or giving him advice. Ralph's issues was a pretty common one, known as the problem of evil and suffering, for which numerous answers are available, but Phil just gave Ralph a few contradictory words in their scenes together, saying that God does not punish people, but at the same time saying that his works are a mystery. You have to factor in the drug use as well. Not that it excuses him, but Ralph repeats throughout the show, even before his son's injury, that he regrets taking coke and it made him do stupid things, which it does of course. His actions have made some fans think of him as an actual devil, and it is interesting that there's elements of this in the show, with the episode incorporating lyrics from the song Sympathy for the Devil into it. For example, Ralph says, "Please allow me to introduce myself," to the surgeon. He says, "Pleased to meet you," to Father Phil, and Phil says, "Were you there when Jesus Christ had his moment of doubt and pain?" It's like we're supposed to have sympathy for Ralph, sympathy for the devil who is returning to the church, begging for his son not to be punished, and instead taking on the punishment himself, leading to his own death. There's also the goat symbolism, an animal which is often attributed to the occult and evil, even being outright called the devil. And remember, Ralph's horse had a goat friend, and the goat survives the fire. So maybe Ralph isn't changed, maybe the devil is still inside him, and this episode is a momentary blip, a door that opens for Ralph but quickly closes again, with him destined to go back to his debauchery ways, starting with the arson attack on the stable, and as such he is given the ultimate punishment, death. Or maybe, looking at it a different way, he is cleansed by returning to God and feeling remorseful, and is instantly killed in this new purified state before he goes back to his old life. Sticking with the horse, and I don't want to go into the did he, didn't he debate for this video, that's a video for another day, but for what it's worth, the actor played it like he didn't do it, but in an interview the Sopranos creator said he did. If he didn't, it's sad in a way for him to go out being blamed for the one thing he didn't do, but if he did, I mean, it's terrible and all, but it's hardly the worst thing he's done. And you could argue it was out of necessity, as it's implied he needs a cash injection to pay for the medical fees. Either that, or maybe he was just angry with Tony for sleeping with his ex and was back to his wicked ways. Then there's the fact that he was still making collections and he says he smacked someone around. So who knows how reformed he actually was, if indeed he was on the path to righting himself. Either way, he's at the principle of an enormous crossroad. I like to think that Ralph made genuine intentions to change. He is known to be Machiavellian and manipulative, but when he is crying in front of Tony, his enemy, I think he is being genuine. After all, crying is a sign of weakness in his culture, so why fake it? And he has nobody to cry with. He has no one. No wife, only an ex. None of his whores are here to share his pain. Maybe Tracy would have done so, but he already killed her. He mentions the possibility of having a woman like Carmela, essentially fantasizing about taking a different path in life. Maybe in some way Carmela keeps Tony in check and stops him from being utterly depraved, and Ralph did not have that element in his life. Maybe he recognizes there was something like this in Rosalie, which is why he proposes to her in this episode. This is all giving Ralph the benefit of the doubt though, as Ralph probably hooked up with Rosalie and Janice to climb the ladder, and the remark about Carmela may have been a dig at Tony because of Tony's line about Ralph's ex. The way I like to think of it is that Ralph was on the path to redemption, or at least ambling his way there, and it was Tony who put a stop to that, the same man who is often a barrier for people's progression, like Chris, Bobby and Janice. Tony brought up that he was sleeping with Ralph's ex at Ralph's weakest moment, which, in this theory I'm purporting, led Ralph to go back to his natural instincts and seek revenge by taking one of Tony's loves, the horse, from him. You can see it in his face. His entire demeanor changes when Tony tells him about the ex. Tony then comes to Ralph's house starting shit. Ralph fails to keep his cool and Tony goes for him, ending up with Ralph dead. As is often the case, when a character fails to change for the better, Tony is there somewhere, partly sharing the blame. 2 episodes later, Tony has a dream where Ralph is in the passenger seat of a car with a caterpillar appearing on Ralph's bald head and then turning into a butterfly. Discussing this with Melfi, she says that the caterpillar changing into a butterfly signifies a change, suggesting Ralph was trying to become a better person. In the same episode, Tony complains about his lack of control, which causes him to make mistakes, suggesting he regrets killing Ralph. So food for thought in my opinion. We all know Ralph was evil, but like I mentioned in my Bobby Bacala video, the state in which he was known for was not the state in which he died, and it might actually be a case that Ralph was on the way to reforming until the real ogre of the Sopranos got in the way, Tony Soprano. So what do you think of all of this? Am I reaching by suggesting Ralph was trying to be a decent guy? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.